This is a Story of the Week podcast. This podcast takes the data we use from the full week of conversational news postings we have at the Conversation Project and picks one story from the top 10 of the week to give you a deeper detail, a deeper dive into the story and what could be the big underlining thought, or sometimes it's just going deep into detail of something I'm ranting about. This week's headline, it was the number 6 of the week, and it goes like this. Julianna Margulies, Susan Sarandon issue apologies over recent controversial comments sparked by Israel-Hamas war. We'll go deeper into those two stars itself as they face some cancellation and maybe still cancellation based on what they said on the comments on Israel and Hamas, what they said to change and try to backtrack what they were saying, and how the larger issue, which we've been talking about for quite some time, of people spouting their opinion, which they have the right to do, freedom of speech, is turning to freedom of losing jobs and losing opportunities, because it also wraps into itself. Go to our website. This is a Conversation Project. Learn more about the Conversation Project, what we do every single day, posting news stories all day long on our feeds on Facebook and Twitter, or call it X, and you engaging in the stories and helping us pick this story here. This story was picked from the top 10, just battling out the actual top 10 stories for the best headlines, and one that would basically kind of get my dander up the most, and hopefully yours as well. And we're looking for your comments for this story. Email me at theconversationinbox@gmail.com, theconversationinbox@gmail.com, for details on how to, complain about this one, or reply in whatever fashion you're seeing this or hearing this on Facebook, on YouTube, on just regular podcast. Reply back to me, and we will conversate on this one in separate listings. So let's get into the headlines specifically on Julianna Margulies and Susan Sarandon, and how what they've said about the Hamas war, which we're going to call it a war, if we're going to call it a war, and how they're changing their tune, why they're changing tune, and why many other people are doing the same thing. For some context, we're going to start by just simply reading parts of the article, if you will. We pulled this one from CNN because various sources went throughout the week of talking about Susan Sarandon's words and Julianna Margulies' words, which is not just about Hamas and Israel, but a whole bunch of other folks. And CNN actually had one that combined the two in their apologies, sort of making a larger scope of this, which is how we got the larger scope idea on this one. Julianna Margulies has released an apology after recent comments on a podcast stoked controversy. The comments she made in an episode of The Back Room with Andy Ostroy podcast last month, the actress voiced criticism of certain marginalized communities for what she perceived to be their lack of support for Jews, among other things. The conversation between Margulies and Ostroy, who are both Jewish, was prompted by the Israel-Hamas war and the rise in anti-Semitism that have seen in this country since the war began. Her take was essentially people who should be complaining about being marginalized should be fighting up for the Jews in the case of here, where there's a lot of talk on the other side, if you will, people of Palestinian descent who aren't so happy the way, let me put it like this, Israel is treating the folks in Gaza and the Palestinians there, not so much Jews in the world hating Palestine, because no one necessarily hates Palestine. They just don't like what's happening about the conflict against them being Israel. Julianna Margulies basically said everybody, blacks, Native Americans, Hispanics, everybody who's marginalized in this nation here in the United States should be up in arms for the Israelis, because the Israelis have been marginalized essentially by the world and mostly by their neighbors for the 75, 80 odd years that the nation of Israel has been in existence officially on paper, essentially giving the land back to the people who originally came there because they had no place to go. And that's how they got there. Let's talk very quickly about the words going against Susan Sarandon. Susan Sarandon was issued an apology last week pertaining to her comment she made last month at the pro-Palestinian rally, basically saying that the Palestinians should be free. A bit more detailed than Palestinians should be free, but essentially getting wrapped up into the thought with the whole chant of from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, those types of things. Essentially, all the chants, all the things saying about the Palestinians, saying they should have freedom, they should not be under the oppression of the Israelis, which is correct, but also the notion that the actual words they're saying and the sentiments they're putting out there means that the Israelis should basically all not so much go to hell, but literally go away, like die. It's genocide on both sides, if you will. And Susan Sarandon, from her words at this particular speak out, and let it be known, Susan Sarandon has been known for her entire career on speaking out against unpopular causes and saying what she wants to say, because She's a great actress. She brings in people to movies and gets people to watch her and gets attention so she can pull attention. So she says things that she wants to say. She'll say things on issues that are big and topical, and they may not be the popular vent, but they are the vent that she wants to take, and people actually pay attention to it. In this case, her talent agency decided they didn't want to deal with her, and they dropped her pretty much immediately. And then she apologized for what she said, for the all the thoughts and prayers and whatever, you give your apologies for those things. But when it came to losing literally work, people were going to stop looking for work for her. That's what stopped her from saying things against the Israelis positive towards the Palestinians. Even though if she believed such, she would not have changed it based on this one little thing. We started this whole discussion, we being the Conversation Project and myself producing stuff, way back when, essentially around the actual attacks, because within weeks there were people taking sides, going back and forth. And as a newer generation, a younger crowd, if you will, there are less people who are in the bent of the we are all behind Israel because they exist, because they've been doing that for 75 years. Then there are people who are like, you know what? Israel's not being all that nice to the Palestinians, which they're not. And so there are a lot of people who are towards the bent of, why can't the Palestinians get better stuff? Eventually apartheid ends in places. Apartheid ended in South Africa, for good or for ill, and they're a much easier to deal with place, even not the better place that people think will dreamy happen. Mandela got elected president and everybody was happy and free. It didn't quite work out that way. But there are more people of a younger persuasion who don't understand, I'll say understand, how we got to here, and most of them honestly don't actually know, and we don't do enough in history to tell people so they can actually understand how we got here, and they can still have that opinion, but oftentimes the opinion is not exactly on the best part of facts. Part of our problem here, the way we're teaching our youth, and the way we're actually dealing with our elderly who aren't taking in the newer perspectives and taking them to any sort of way to determine how things may have changed. So we have a lot of things going wrong in that case. But Susan Sarandon specifically, and going back to the young law student that we talked about months ago, who had a great job at a great law firm, and then decided to say something, like Palestine is awesome and Israel should be destroyed, and lost his job publicly, and which started many law schools writing to their law universities saying that if your students are coming out battling the fight for Palestine, saying that Israel is wrong, Israel is bad, Israel should go away, we don't want your law students, and we're not going to come to your schools to try to find people. Since then, there's been a lot of back and forth in the lay land of people saying their opinions of what's going on here. Traditional opinions are, we are backing Israel, period. Yes, Israel has issues with Gaza and how they treat the Gazans, period. Yes, Israel has issues with its leadership, Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, and the fact that he probably should be in jail for corruption, but he's the guy that's leading things right now. And yes, the Israelis aren't so happy that he's the guy leading things right now, but he's the guy leading things right now. And the Hamas specifically, and various other terrorist organizations specifically, are attacking Israel because they exist, because it's in their charter to attack Israel because they exist. It is there. The flip side of that has been Israel's goal is to defeat Hamas completely, essentially kill every member of Hamas. Never a good thing for history to try to kill every member of a warring action, because you can't necessarily kill everyone, and someone will remember and someone will take up arms for them in some other case going forward. Let's look at Afghanistan. We did that to ourselves in a lot of ways and made it worse in a lot of ways. It's the truth. At the same time, we can't just let being punched in the nose go without being warranted, without having some say back, without punching somebody back. That as well. So what's going on with Hollywood specifically, the people around the world in general, and the words being said both pro and both against the Palestinian issue, the Hamas issue, the Israeli issue? Something interesting happened this week that may have made it worse, or at least brought a whole nother level of the debate part to the debate. Because when you come down to debate, it's one thing to say, I believe this, you believe this, and we should go back and forth. It comes down to a real crime being done, a real actual wrong being righted, or wrong being wronged, if you will, and coming to terms with the fact that something is wrong. If there's a body on the street and blood is coming out of their head and they're not breathing, the body is a body of a dead person. Somehow this person has passed away. How the person passed away makes a difference, but the fact that the person was a good person or a bad person is beside the point. There's a dead body that must be dealt with on the street, and the persons responsible should be dealt with accordingly. Was it self-defense? Well, then they can determine that, and then that person has to live with that death on their hands for the rest of their life. Was it flat out murder? Was it plotted? That person should be dealt with and spend a lot of time in jail for the rest of their life. Was it a crime of passion or convenience that just sort of happened? Well, that person must be dealt with and dealt with accordingly, with probably some jail time going forward. But there is nuance, there is context, there's things going on. 3 university presidents were called to Congress for a dog and pony show, as it became. But the dog and pony show actually became a real point of actual seriousness and a reason for us not so much point the fingers at the whole wokeness of stuff, but at the actual heart of debate, heart of thought, heart of the whole First Amendment thing. Liz McGill of the University of Pennsylvania, Sally Kornbluth of MIT, and Claudia Gay of Harvard were all called to Congress to talk about the discussions happening on campus. The fact that there's way too many anti-Semitic attacks and anti-Semitic words being spoken on many college campuses. So they went to the heavy hitters, the big ones, Penn, MIT, and Harvard, to talk about that because they're getting a lot of big headlines what's going on. There's been a lot of protests, a lot of sit-ins, a lot of speak for the pro-Palestinian sides, and a lot of chants that it may seem anti-Semitic because essentially the meaning behind them, while the people saying them are saying they're talking about peace and harmony and the living conditions of the Palestinians in the area, they have their roots in anti-Semitic tropes and essentially are what you say when you want to back down the other side. There's all that. Now, all 3 actually condemned the speech of hate on both levels, but their mealy-mouthed and really sad defenses of how they're letting things happen on campus is leading to many of them being called to leave, and many of them actually losing money as donors are like, we're not doing this. It's just what it is. Donors have a right to pull money for whatever reasons they want to, which, yes, is influenced from money, but it was the handling, it was the saying, it was the words done by these presidents. And watching President Gay trend on Twitter X was a whole nother level of crazy this week because President Gay is also a sort of a mockism for President Barack Obama. You can go look that up on your own. But watching what these people say, watching essentially President Gay put out an apology to what she said on the Hill, which made it worse, and the other people, the other presidents, not doing well. Now, if all 3 of these guys, let me throw this out here, were men, they probably wouldn't have handled it the same way. They probably would not have been addressed the same way they were as they were on the Hill, even though they were women who were doing most of the grilling on Congress doing this. But the responses should have been simple. We heartily reject the hate speech on both sides of the conflict. Those who are pro-Israel, those who are pro-Palestine, those who are pro-Jewish, those who are pro-Palestinian. We condemn the pure hate speech on both levels. We address and acknowledge the conflict as regional. It's happening in a certain region, but the implications are worldwide as many people of those nationalities come from there or have ties to there. And it also, as this nation deals with its own world level, as it's the cop of the world, if you will, helping to resolve and sometimes ultimately resolve conflicts of various levels. That being said, there has been a extremely easy to chart, easy to see increase in incidents of anti-Semitism across the nation and across our campuses. My campus, this president speaking there, my campus specifically. And these are things that we have had difficulties in working with, but we are working with them in the best abilities, while acknowledging that freedom of speech does exist on college campuses, and college campuses should be the place for debate on all sides. They can also toss in the fact that there have been a lot of back and forth, mainly from Republicans who have been complaining that the liberal nature of the universities have blasted and not allowed various conservative voices, J. Cleveland Payne would say various racist and just crazy voices, on campus just to cause a fanfare, just to bring clicks to those people's platforms, just to be mean and awful and crazy and for them to make money. There is a place for debate, a place for speech. There's a place for the actual freedom of exchange of ideas. But when a closed-minded group joins up to show up just to yell at another closed-minded group because they know other closed-minded people come to yell at them, that's not what we're looking for. What university presidents should have said that this is a new time, a new day, a new age, and a new generation where they are expecting more out of us than we have been expecting out of ourselves lately. There are changing dynamics and changing ways of thinking that mean we may not agree with what is the common thinking anymore. And the we could be whatever we want to be about. So if the traditional thought was Israel and Israel gets support, that's one thing. But in the new day and age where you get a chance to see more, do more, learn more, and actually visit and do your own research for people who actually do understand how research works, you can see with your own eyes what you see, and you can determine what goes on. It gets a little dangerous because then you can say something like, yes, there are cases where people get the wrong information, and there are various venues and various actors who prey upon that and are making money off of people with the wrong information, which is partially what's growing in this anti-Semitic age we have right now. But this is something that university presidents can't fix on their own. We do not have magic powers. We do not have superpowers. We're not demigods of our own that can snap our fingers and have everyone fall in line. There must be speech. There must be confrontation because there must be debate. It must be civil. It must be wrapped in some sort of reality, some sort of fact. But we must have debate on college campuses. We must have debate across this nation. We should have better debate across the world. I'm not a college campus president, so I would never get a chance to give out that speech or give anything towards that. But those are the words that should have been said, something I believe should have been said out there. Now, granted, the left and the right and the folks in Congress would have, bitched and complained regardless because their jobs is not to actually, pass legislation to make us better, but to bitch and complain about things out there they can't really control because they get sound bites for it. We do know there is extreme growth in anti-Semitic acts going on here in the States. By contrast, there are a lot more people who are speaking out for Palestinian interest here in the States. And that should be happening. That is fine. And if you want to say more people should be back in Israel, that is fine. And if you want to say more people should actually understand the region of Gaza and how the Palestinians are dealing with life, that is understandable. But the larger debate, which we've talked about over and over again in weeks, is people losing jobs, losing careers, losing friendships over things like this. Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson recently starred in The Banshees of Inisherin, which I'm totally butchering and I've not seen the movie, so I can't really go deep into detail on the full meaning of it. But essentially, it's a movie that goes into the growing tensions in Ireland as the one little nation that is on one little island was starting to displace itself from itself and basically fight each other. Two former friends were no longer friends. One guy started escalating because one guy decided because of the growing tensions, he wasn't going to be his friend anymore and they were going to stop talking, period. This is something that we may be moving towards. And it's something that you may have seen in your own prophetic thought process on other issues. But this is one that may actually be the existential crisis that is the existential crisis. This may be an issue on a people who should have a right to exist over people who believe that land was stolen, so those people should give their land back. And, oh, by the way, they still shouldn't exist anyway. That's kind of the underlying, layperson idea of what's going on in Israel and why Israel is an issue. It's always more complicated than that, but everything's more complicated than that. You should be able to have an opinion on anything you want to, whether that opinion is, as I jokingly say, the right or wrong opinion, or whether that opinion is, in most cases, popular or unpopular, or actually, in this case, whether this opinion has the larger scale effect on the global politics or not. It does. The small little nation of Israel, only about 75, 80 years old as a nation, but the people, obviously predating Christ because they're Jewish and Israeli, have a larger play in this war going on. We can complain about the war that's going on between Ukraine and Russia. We can complain about all the conflicts going on in Africa, which seem like it's a whole another bit of child's play from people just playing around with guns and wanting to think they're in control of stuff. But this isn't so much the ruling part of a nation that's very grand and very majestic. It's literally in the middle of a desert with not much to see. This is about people. This is about people who can actually figure out how to get along with each other if the right people are in charge, and with the wrong people tending to be in charge at the wrong times. Whoever is in power, or whoever wants the most power, will do what they can to secure the power, not secure the people. Kumbaya and tearing down walls and living in perfect harmony, probably not going to happen. But conditions can be put to levels of better on both sides. This was supposed to be about Julianna Margulies and Susan Sarandon, and it is about them. And it is about the larger picture of people here in the United States who are nowhere near there, spouting off their mouth, saying words, and having an issue with what's going on. Hopefully, you didn't get the blank, pure ideals of what I believe about this in this actual recording, and I can give them to you privately going forward. You probably have a kind of an idea, but I didn't just flat out say, up with these guys, down with these guys. Because the answer is, my opinion doesn't really matter. I'm not there. I'm not Israeli. I have no business or cultural aspects going on in the nation. It's the people who live there who have to deal with it. And whether the United States gives money to one side or gives aid to another side, it doesn't really make a difference. Those people, in this case, it really is, those people have to find a way to want to fix it. And then other folks can try to help fix it. But they've got to come to some place on their own where they are being less pro-Israel, less pro-Palestinian, and more, we just got to live here. And that's that. Whatever Julianna Margulies believes or whatever Susan Sarandon believes essentially doesn't really matter. And if you're living here in the United States, especially on a college campus where you should have your opinion and you have the right to speak it out, your actual opinion, unless there's actions that isn't firing bullets at someone else, doesn't matter. And in that case, it actually does matter in a different sense. It needs to be fixed. It's one of those things that needs to be fixed that will probably never be fixed, which is why this nation, this world is such a dynamic place to live on. There's always a conflict that needs to be resolved, and always someone who's screwing up the conflict resolution so it can't be resolved. All I'm saying is that the words you say matter. The side you pick right now matters, and your actions must back them up. My big problem with Susan Sarandon and Julianna Margulies is they backed down pretty quickly when it got some backlash. They didn't try to explain it, although the Harvard professors tried to explain themselves and they did a poor job of it, so that's maybe why they didn't try to explain it. They just flat out conceded and gave up. I don't need you to concede and give up your stance on this. I don't need you to start throwing blows at the other side going forward. I just need you to listen to the other side. Understand that they have a right to live, a right to think, a right to do. And how that plays out comes on just how well you're able to accept their rights, and they accept your rights as well. That's been the Story of the Week podcast for this week. This is for the week ending December the 9th, 2023. The Story of the Week came from the weekly wrap-up podcast. We took the top 10 stories that we presented all week long throughout the week in our daily postings, the pure numbers from you guys, and this story was the number 6 story of the week as a headline. It was kind of old, but the conflict's not going anywhere, so I figured I had plenty of time to work on this one and work in some new details with the Harvard business with the Harvard and the MIT and the UPenn presidents going before Congress and what they did on this one. If you agree with me, that's great. If you disagree with me, that's great as well. I need you to email me regardless. The conversation inbox at gmail.com, or reply wherever you saw this podcast or videocast with some comments so we can have a greater conversation. Follow our feeds on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook.com/This Is a Conversation Project. Twitter.com, X.com. It still goes to Twitter. The th_conversation, that's our handle there. And we want you to engage in the feeds. Every 50 minutes, we post a news story around the world, from around the world, various places. Some of the sources you may hate as much as you hate this commentary. We just want you to like, love, hate, share those stories, because if you do, they get higher engagement. I know which stories to talk about for the top 10 in the weekly wrap up every single weekday morning for things you might have heard, the morning news update, and inside of the drops we do for Twitter and TikTok and YouTube shorts with little clips every single day. Go to our main website, thisisaconversationproject.com, and you can see what we do and how to find us everywhere. Check out our sponsors page, check out our partnerships page, see if you can help us out there. The most important thing you can do is email us with your comments and complaints. We'll take them both. And follow us on our feeds to give us the words to put into our mouth. That being said, I always wrap things up by saying stay limber, stay hydrated, stay on task. That is me reminding you that life is a long journey and you must make sure you are prepared to get through the journey and do what you can to not shorten it prematurely on your own. That's it. That's the commentary. This is the story of the week for this week ending December the 9th, 2023. What story will kind of get into my sort of get my dander up next week that we'll talk about here for you to actually respond to? We have 7 full days to find out. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.